The doctor wandered the interior of the castle as he looked for just the right spot to read, when he heard what sounded like a pair of students begging. He turned a corner and found Harry and Ron standing before a stern-looking matriarch in dark blue robes. "Please, Professor McGonagall, even though it's not really a matter of life or death, we desperately need to go to Hogsmeade tomorrow," Harry pleaded. "I wouldn't be so sure about that, Harry. If we don't go to Hogsmeade, she just might kill us," Ron rebutted seriously. Professor McGonagall gave the boys a look that even made the doctor feel like he was in trouble, and he was at least 800 years older than her.
Be that as it may, boys, the new rules for this semester are very clear. Due to the increase in Death Eater attacks and the huge influx of dark creatures into this area, no students are allowed off school grounds without an adult escort, she reminded them. It was Ron's turn to plead, and he was wide-eyed with desperation. "But, Professor, it's Hermione's birthday tomorrow, and we forgot to buy her a present," he explained again. "I'm sorry, Ronald, but your lack of foresight doesn't constitute an emergency worthy of disrupting the all-faculty meeting scheduled for tomorrow," Professor McGonagall replied tersely. The doctor stepped forward, coughing to let the others know he was there. The head of Gryffindor House recognized him from the description Dumbledore had given her. "I'll take them to Hogsmeade," the doctor offered. "I have some business there anyway." McGonagall thought for a moment and nodded. "I suppose if one of the Prime Minister's Aurors is willing to escort you, I see no problem with you going," she told her students. "So long as you stay by his side the entire time," she added. "Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Doctor," Harry and Ron shouted as they grinned at each other. The two students ran off, relieved that they wouldn't end up disappointing Hermione. "I take it I don't have to tell you how dangerous things could get out there?" Professor McGonagall asked rhetorically. Shrugging, the doctor replied, "That's pretty much my day-to-day routine." McGonagall raised an eyebrow in surprise at how sincere he sounded. "Well, just make sure you get them back in one piece, and do make sure Ron gets Hermione a thoughtful present for once," she ordered. When the doctor nodded in agreement, she tipped her hat towards him and said, "Good evening, then, Doctor." Knowing a dismissal when he heard one, the doctor made his way to the Great Hall to sit down and read. He had already decided on the perfect present to give Hermione for her birthday. Harry and Ron ran to the courtyard as soon as their afternoon classes finished. They had given Ginny the job of distracting Hermione so they could get to Hogsmeade without her knowing. They found the doctor standing next to a waiting Thestral carriage. "Ready to go?" he asked. He didn't wait for an answer and got into the carriage. Ron and Harry hopped in right after him. The short trip to Hogsmeade was filled with small talk as the young men talked about Quidditch. The doctor was intrigued by this sport and vowed to give it a try at some point in the future as they pulled to a stop in Hogsmeade. They piled out and made their way down the shop-lined street. Ron purchased a small portable Wizard's wireless so Hermione could listen to music while she studied. Harry found an extremely detailed model of Hogwarts that stood over a foot tall. The model was enchanted so the tiny flags of the towers flapped in a magical breeze. Lights would also come on in the castle, depending upon what time of day it was. The doctor knew exactly where the present he wanted to give Hermione was. He just had to get back to the TARDIS to fetch it. They were halfway to the old blue box when they heard people screaming. Several witches and wizards came running around a corner and scattered when they reached the main street. Ron and Harry drew their wands and held them at the ready when a strange roar echoed off the buildings. The doctor pulled out his sonic screwdriver when he heard large footsteps coming their way. A huge beast with the body of a lion and a scorpion tail rushed onto the street. Its head looked vaguely human, if one discounted the 3 rows of razor-sharp teeth in its elongated mouth. "Oh, bloody hell! A manticore!" Ron swore. "Might as well put this away. Their skin's impervious to charms," he said as he put his wand back in his pocket. The doctor glanced over at Harry and asked, "What options does that leave us?" Harry looked at the manticore and then met the doctor's eyes. "Run!" he suggested. The 3 of them turned at the same time and ran the way they had came. The manticore smiled, showing off its teeth to the fresh prey running from it, and gave chase. "Anything else I should know about manticores?" the doctor yelled as he ran. "They eat people, and their sting is fatal," Ron replied frantically, pumping his arms while he ran. "Oh, good. I was beginning to wonder if we had offended it in some way, and that's why it was chasing us," the doctor said casually. He looked ahead of him and saw the boys he had watched turn into large canaries the other day step out of the joke shop. They weren't paying attention and would have ended up walking directly into the path of the manticore had the doctor not put on a burst of speed and run ahead of Ron and Harry. When he reached the boys with the canary candy, he shoved them back into the store to get them out of harm's way, not having time to be gentle. He swiped the box of mystical confections from one of their pockets as a plan started to take form in his mind. "This way!" he yelled to Harry and Ron and ducked down a narrow side alley. They followed him, and the manticore tried to follow, but ended up sliding past them, its mass being too great to make such a tight turn. They hid in an alcove off of one of the buildings as the beast sniffed around the opening to the alley. It gave up temporarily and went back to prowling the main street. Panting for air, Ron looked down at the half-empty box of candy in the doctor's hand. "Do you really think that now is a good time for sweets?" he demanded, incredulous. The doctor turned the box in his hand so the others could read the label. Harry read it out loud. "Canary Creams, another fine product from Weasley's Wizard Wheezes." Harry looked up at Ron. "Glad to see your brothers are doing well," he said sincerely. Ron looked like he couldn't believe they were having this conversation. "What? Do you think old Manty back there won't eat us if we're poultry?" he asked. "Hate to break it to you, but Charlie said they'll eat anything. He told me he even heard of one of them eating a politician a few years back," he told them. Harry looked at the doctor's expectant face and knew the older man was waiting on them to make whatever leap he had. He glanced back down at the candies and began to grin as he put the pieces together. His fear fled before his anticipation of mischief. "Of course! Why didn't I think of that?" he exclaimed. Ron looked back and forth between Harry and the doctor. "Have you both gone mental?" he inquired. The doctor shook the box of candy. "Ron, you said the manticore's skin was impervious to charms, right?" he asked. Ron nodded, beginning to feel like he was missing something. Harry kept grinning and added, "But a canary's feathers aren't." Ron rolled his eyes and said, "Now I know you've both gone mental. It would take several canary creams to transform a monster of that size." Beaming with pride that Ron finally got the plan, the doctor said, "Right, which is why you and I need to get close enough to toss the rest of these in its mouth while avoiding its stinger." Ron scrunched up his forehead in disbelief. "Why me?" he asked in a screechy voice. "Who's the best spellcaster here?" the doctor prompted. Ron held out his hand for half the candies. "Harry is," he answered. He looked at Harry and said, "You'd better not miss, or we're manty snacks." The manticore was slowly stalking a little old witch, playing with its prey, when it heard yelling and whistling behind it. A young human with flaming red hair, and something else, judging by its scent, were jumping around trying to get its attention. Ready to oblige their death wish, the manticore leapt in their direction. It struck out with its deadly scorpion tail, but missed the older man when he dodged at the last second. It let out a mighty roar in frustration, and was rewarded by several sugary morsels being tossed into its mouth. The manticore snapped its jaws shut and chewed the tasty treats. It looked up in surprise when it started to feel funny. Glancing at its hindquarters, the manticore watched first one, then many feathers sprout. When the final feather had taken form, the now truly gigantic canary looked at the doctor, betrayal in its eyes. "Petrificus totalis!" Harry yelled. The manticore's plumage changed to a dull gray, and it fell over, totally petrified. The doctor straightened his bow tie. "Nothing quite like running for your life from some hideous creature to liven up a day," he reflected. Ron leaned over to Harry, who had joined them in the middle of the street. "Completely mental," he whispered. Harry couldn't stop smiling, the joy of cheating death yet again filling his soul. "Yeah, but loads of fun," he replied.